You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Y'all, welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, ready to take you through another season of Gonzaga hoops. First, I want to sincerely thank all of you for making this podcast your first listen of the day. Some of you have been with me from the beginning, back in the 2018-2019 season. Some of you are much newer to the show. Either way, I appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to listen and potentially watch, because as of now, this podcast is officially on YouTube. You can find the YouTube channel at Locked On Zags. Please hit the subscribe button on that. I really appreciate it. We're trying to get up to subscribers on the show. It's only been just an episode. We're back now. We're up on YouTube. Would really appreciate all of you taking the time to hit that subscribe button. Check me out there as well. All right, happy Monday, everybody. Depending on when you're listening to this, the Zags are 2-0. They got a date against Alcorn State this evening, a significantly, hopefully less challenging opponent than the Texas Longhorns, although Gonzaga did not make that game against Texas look particularly challenging, which is the heavy emphasis on today's Mailbag Monday episode, of course, after they went up 20 going into halftime, ended up beating the Longhorns by 12 in a highly anticipated matchup between the number 1 and number 5 team in the countries. Just a reminder for those of you who who asks, is Drew Timme the official President Lord of the Republic of Texas? Yeah, what an incredible performance from Drew Timme on Saturday evening. 37 points, 14 of 19 shooting. He looked absolutely incredible from the opening tip. He scored the first points of the bucket of the game, first bucket of the game, and just absolutely dominated from there on out. It was the Drew Timme show without a doubt. We kind of knew that it would be. He's playing against Texas. He wanted to play this game in Texas. His family was in town. He's from Texas, obviously, and he let him know. He really had an absolutely outstanding performance. One of the best single games that I've ever seen a Gonzaga player have. And we're going to talk plenty more about Chet Holmgren. This next question comes from Darren Olson at HeavyDew44 on Twitter, who asks, Fran Fraschilla and John Sciambi last night indicated they think Drew is a 4-year college player. With the NIL in place, it wouldn't shock me if Drew comes back for his senior season. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I heard this too, and I was a little surprised. At first, I kind of thought, oh, there's no way, but I thought about it a little bit more. It's definitely not crazy. I think Drew's NBA skill sets are just a little bit capped. I've said this before, and I don't mean this to be a super negative thing, but his style of play, that Kevin McHale comparison that gets thrown out a lot by broadcasters and by other Gonzaga analysts, it's just not really the style of play that fits in today's NBA, and he's not a big outside shooter. He doesn't move laterally very well defensively. We've seen improvements in both of those areas, which I think is going to help him when he tries to carve out an NBA career. But I don't think he's a guy who's going to succeed more in college than he is in the NBA. I don't think there's any doubt about that, nor is there any shame in that. So you could understand why maybe coming back for a 4th season and just cementing himself as one of the greatest college basketball players of all time, one of the greatest Zags of all time. He already is, but continue to cement that legacy. I could understand why that might be appealing to him. Frankly, I don't know that the NIL is a huge factor here. It certainly helps in that sense a lot, but going to the NBA is going to pay a lot more money than the NIL deals that he is going to get. So the choice is still going to be whether he wants to go, chase his dream. His dream has always been to play in the teams are not going to game plan how to stop Chet Holmgren. It's not going to be a factor. Drew Timme is the player they need to stop. Frankly, in this game, it is very simple. Gonzaga started going to Drew Timme. Texas couldn't stop them. Story over. They continued to go to Drew Timme, and I think the plan was we're going to give the ball to Drew Timme until Texas capably stops Drew Timme, and it just never happened. So they just kept giving him the ball. I don't know that there's a lot more to read into it than that. However, there are some other questions on this topic. Strike Nowhere on Twitter, he suggested, should we be concerned with Holmgren's production? I don't want to say he's shrunk in the spotlight. You did, though. You did say that. But it certainly seemed like he was being way too deferential to Timme. Jim on Facebook had a similar question. He said, Chet seems to defer quite a bit on offense. Do you see that as a trend? So I'm going to pick words with the phrase way too deferential, because saying he was way too anything implies that it was the result was bad. The Zags went into halftime up 20 against the number 5 team in the country. They won by 12 in a game that was, save for maybe 90 seconds or so of a little bit of uneasiness early in the first half or early in the second half, there was no real threat of this game not going in the W column for Gonzaga against the 5th ranked team in the country. You can't really nitpick anything in that situation. I guess to flip the question, had Chet been more aggressive looking for his shot, let's say he was unhappy with only having 2 points in the first half. In the second half, he comes out, he tries to score more. He takes contested shots. He puts the ball on the ground. He forces Drew Timme to get away from the rim so that Chet can play down low. Would you have been happy with that? Because I absolutely would not have. Drew Timme barely missed a shot this entire game, and Texas, for some reason, did not change the way that they tried to guard him. There was no reason for Gonzaga to do anything differently on that end of the floor at all. He was killing it. He was scoring at ease. Chet Holmgren taking a step back, not being the offensive focal point when he has yet to be the offensive focal point at all this season, and frankly probably will not be, is not something that I view in any way, shape, or form as an issue. In fact, I view it as a positive thing. He is here to help win basketball games. He is not here to pump up his individual stats. He is like Jalen Suggs in that way. That is why these two are such huge pieces for this program. Jalen was frequently not the leading scorer for the Zags. He was frequently not the second leading scorer for the Zags. That will be the case with Chet Holmgren, and I don't think we need to panic about that, because he is here mostly for his contributions on the defensive end of the floor. This next question comes from a nice email from Larry via Gmail. He says, Timme was the featured offensive star. Chet was quietly exposed. He puts in parentheses on the offensive end. Didn't seem in the flow as a wing on offense. Hardly touched the ball most trips. Defensively, he can use his length inside to intimidate and rebound. On offense, he is and was easily moved out of position by bigger bodies. Against Dixie State and probably most WCC teams, he can go over the top, not against bigger and better bodies. His lack of weight may keep him on the bench in crunch time. Only one game, but NBA scouts had to downgrade him as a top big 2022 pick. Looks like he will almost exclusively be on the wing on offense, thus he'll need to show his shooting range, passing, court sense, along with blocks and rebounds on the defensive end. Maybe he needs 6 big meals a day and 2 years in Spokane. So I'm going to basically disagree with all of this. I got to be completely honest here. Exposed on the offensive end, I don't think so. It's not like he missed a whole bunch of shots. He just wasn't utilized on the offensive end. Didn't seem in the flow as a wing on offense. shot blocking ability. That is just going to happen. There's no doubt in my mind that he will play in big time minutes unless he is fouled out of the game. And if NBA scouts downgraded him in any way, shape, or form after this game, they should lose their jobs. That's the honest truth here. He did not. Yes, he didn't have a huge game statistically. I understand that, but he helped his team win. He grabbed multiple rebounds. He impacted a ton of shots on the defensive end against good players. Yeah, there was a few times he got exposed. Trey Mitchell got up and underneath him a little bit, got him to bite on some pump fakes and got him into some foul trouble. That's going to happen. Freshman bigs get in foul trouble. It's just a reality of the situation. It should not impact his draft stock at all. Also mentioned his shooting range, passing, court sense. We haven't seen the shooting range. I've acknowledged that, but his passing has already proven to be very good. His court sense has already proven to be very good. He's an elite shot blocker, an elite rebounder. He has not done anything. And this game did not do anything to change my view of him as a draft stock player, or I'm almost positive any NBA scouts' view of him as a potential player at that level. And the idea that he could potentially be in Spokane for 2 years is frankly laughable. It's just not going to happen. Every time Jalen Suggs didn't have his best game, people talked about him potentially coming back for a second year. I don't know if it's just wishful thinking. I don't know if other fan bases do this about their one and done guys, but it's not going to happen. Chet Holmgren is going to go to the NBA this year. He's going to be a top 5 pick. He's going to have games that are much more statistically impactful than this game. But the fact that he took a back seat, let Drew Timme do his work, and helped get this team a commanding victory over number 5 team in the country says only positive things about him in my mind. All right, that's a wrap on our first segment. Coming up, we're going to answer even more listener-submitted questions all episode long. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. I love this app, and I know that you will too. Prize Picks is a leader in college sports daily fantasy. They offer more college football props than anyone in the world and offer all the all-star players from not only the Power 5 schools, but from your favorite mid-major programs as well. New users that deposit and use the promo code LOCKEDON will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks allows mixed sport entries, so you can take the over on Chet Holmgren combined with the under on Patrick Mahomes in the same entry. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com and use promo code LOCKEDON, or go to your App Store and download the app today. Chords, but they do not stack up to Gonzaga's. Next question comes from Christian via Gmail. It says 3-point shooting. The Zags were 7 for 19 from beyond the arc in the Texas game. This is in comparison to 6 of 18 last year in the Kansas game. Also, obviously, Gonzaga's first game of the year that year. They won both games by 12 points. What are your thoughts and takeaways on this? And then he says, you had mentioned previously that you thought fewer attempts would be the best course of action. How many attempts would you like to see the Zags average from behind the 3-point line? Yeah, obviously that depends what the defense gives. A lot of zone this year. That's something that I expect. We did not see that out of Texas. Texas played their aggressive man defense while trying to take players away from the middle of the court, which frankly probably did have an impact on Chet Holmgren's ability to contribute. But other teams will probably pack in tight 2-3 zones. In those games, I think we might see more 3-point shooting. We might see Chet stretch it out a little bit. We'll see more from Julian. We might see a little bit more from Hickman or Hunter Sallis. Obviously, Rasir Bolton, 7 for 10 on the season, an incredible start from him beyond the arc. I don't think 7 for 19 feels awful. I wouldn't like to see them shooting more than 22 often. 15 to 20 is probably the right range, but again, it's really just dependent on the defense. This game, they took 19 threes. Very few of them, from what I remember, were bad shots. They were in rhythm. They had open looks. They were taking open threes. That's more what matters to me. It would be frustrating to see Gonzaga settling for threes when they should be trying to get the ball down low. But obviously in this game, that was not an issue. Every time down the floor, they tried to get the ball into Drew Timme. And if they continue to do that and it happens to lead to 19 opportunities to shoot some threes, that's totally okay with me. I don't think that that's a bad number for them. Next one is also from Christian. He says, undoubtedly, you will get questions about the rotation. Spoiler alert, I am. Yep, that's what we're going to get to after this. He says, Coach Few elected to get the lion's share of minutes to the experienced players. Nembhard played 40, Timme 38, Bolton played 32. This is lockstep with previous years and no surprise. It's a surprise to some people, Christian, I'll tell you that right now. It says, who do you believe will ultimately play comparable minutes to the three listed above? Part of this for me is that the game plan was to keep going until it stopped working, and it never stopped working. Yes, very astute on the last point. I think those three guys, Nembhard, Timme, and Bolton, are the only guys who average 30 per night. That's kind of where I'm at with that. I think Holmgren will be next. I think he's going to probably be around 30 per night. I think we're going to see some foul trouble potentially limit him some games. He had 4 fouls in the second half of this game. If I am going to criticize Chet Holmgren, that would be the criticism. He left his feet too many times. He got outworked by guys who have a lot of experience in college basketball and knew how to pump fake and knew how to get him in the air. That's things that happen to freshmen. That'll happen. That might limit him to more in the 25, 28 minute range. Gonzaga is very comfortable with Anton Watson playing big minutes, so I think he'll probably be up in the 25, 28 minute range as well, more on days that Chet or Drew get in foul trouble. Julian Strother's probably next, but I'd be surprised if he plays 30 minutes per night. He's not a very good defensive player. He could improve. He will improve. I'm almost confident of that, but as of right now, he's not a great defensive player, whereas Hunter Sallis, Nolan Hickson, they are good defensive players, so I think we'll see them rotate in more in situations where Gonzaga needs defense more than offense. So I think those guys are Watson and Strother, maybe 25-ish minutes per night. And that's kind of it. Everybody else will play. You know, they'll get some minutes. Certainly Hickman and Sallis are going to be part of the rotation, but they're not going to play a ton. And so I really don't think there's going to be a lot of guys playing over 30 minutes per night. This next question, similar vein, from Dad Risk on Twitter. He says, does Hickman playing over Strother, down the stretch mean a lot or a little? Also, why is it that every year we come in touting our depth just to ask 2 weeks later, do we have as much depth as we thought? Seems like us fans assume every question mark is going to turn out positive. So I'm not sure I buy completely the do we have as much depth as we thought conversation. I don't think that's, I mean, it could be happening. I don't see it happening all that often. I think we have that depth. This is the deepest team Gonzaga's ever had. That has not changed. Certainly some of the players that we're expecting to have really good starts didn't have great games against Texas. It was one game. Julian Strother didn't do much against Texas. People who've been touting him as a potential guy who could leave for the league this year, which includes me, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, probably looked at that game and thought, okay, that's where the bottom could fall out there. He wasn't awful. He didn't do a whole lot. He's kind of one-dimensional, and when he's not doing the one thing, he becomes a little bit less easy to play. Chet, obviously, we've discussed him at large, certainly. But I don't think this team has a lack of depth. Mark Few is just pretty rigid about how many players he wants to play. Getting back to the Hickman thing, I kind of touched on it a little bit. Nolan Hickman's a better defensive player. He is more well-rounded and more versatile in what he can do on the basketball court than Julian. Julian's a better three-point shooter, although if Hickman starts knocking down threes at a reliable rate, that could impact Julian's playing time. Now, Julian's obviously 6'7", Hickman's 6'2". Pretty big difference there. It depends on lineups and situations. But if you want a defensive presence on the floor at the end of the game, if you want to play lockdown defense, Julian Strother will not be on the floor until he proves he can be a very good defensive player. And it's not even that he's that bad. It's that Anton Watson is so good. It's that Nolan Hickson and Hunter Sallis as true freshmen are so good already on that side of the floor that if you need a defensive lineup, Julian just doesn't play. So I think his minutes are going to be impacted by that a little bit. I think as a streaky shooter, if he's not shooting the ball very well, his minutes could disappear relatively quickly. Doesn't mean that he's not as good as we think he is. It doesn't mean that he's a bust. It doesn't mean that our depth is a problem. It just means that he's a little bit more one-dimensional, and on a team with so much talent, only being really good at one or two things could limit your playing time. Next question comes from Strike Nowhere, his second question of the show. He says, why wasn't Sallis given more minutes versus Texas? Because Mark Few's back, baby. That's the primary reason. I was surprised when I looked it up and saw that Sallis played 4 minutes. 4 minutes. I didn't realize it was that low. I knew he didn't come in much, but 4 minutes is pretty low. But Mark Few's back. He's the head coach now, and he likes playing 8 dudes. And Sallis was one of them, but he did not play much. Nembhard's not going to play every minute this season. He played 40 against Texas. That's not going to happen. I think that Nembhard taking less minutes probably makes more minutes for Nolan, more than it means more minutes for Sallis. Bolton's probably not going to play 32 every single game this year as well. So I think Sallis will play more. But he is a true freshman. He is a good player on both ends of the floor, but he doesn't do anything really dramatically better than he's not better than Rasir Bolton. He's probably a little bit longer defensively, a little bit better on that end of the floor, but Gonzaga didn't need him. And, maybe Mark Few kind of has that got to earn it mentality. So he may have just been like, hey, you're going to get a little bit of run here, but this is a game for the vets. I think the fact that he has gone through that he has been the leader, the facilitator, really, really helps him in this role. Obviously, he's probably happy as hell to be winning basketball games. I have no doubt about that, but he knows what it's like to lose. He knows what it's like to struggle. He knows how to pick up his teammates, how to be the person who helps the players around him who maybe aren't feeling great, who aren't having good games. Like, he's gone through all of that. And he doesn't seem to be a super vocal leader, but he's a great use, like you said, calming presence. I think I've loved every single thing that we've seen out of Rasir Bolton so far. Genuinely, every single thing. He's been probably my favorite player to watch on this roster, specifically my favorite newcomer to watch on this roster. Next question, sticking with Rasir Bolton. This one comes from Austin King at Austin_King52 on Twitter. He says, will Rasir Bolton have the highest O rating, offensive rating, on the team by the end of the year? Well, he is sure as heck off to a great start. His offensive rating right now is 175.4, which is ridiculously good. Next up is Nolan Hickson at 143.3. That's obviously in a much, much smaller role. For Hickson, he's played far less minutes through the first couple of games of the season. I would not be surprised if Bolton leads the team in offensive rating. He's not going to shoot 70% from downtown like he has so far. He's 7 for 10 on threes, including one from about 39 feet. He's not going to keep doing that. I think there's a reasonable chance he's over 35, 36%, but he's not going to be 70%. That would be unreal. But he's great at finishing around the rim. That's always been his strong suit. That was his strong suit at Iowa State. That was kind of the perceived strong suit for him this year. The outside shooting is just kind of gravy. He's also going to get a lot of fast break opportunities because he's one of the fastest dudes that I've ever seen on the basketball court. He also is a benefit of Gonzaga's quick hands on defense from Anton Watson, Hickman, Sallis, all of those guys. He's going to get out on the fast break a lot. Those are easy buckets, help that O rating go up. He also is an outstanding free throw shooter. He hasn't missed one this year. He's like 80-something% guy. So he gets the free throw line a lot. He converts a lot of his free throws. He shoots well from three. Pretty good chance at the end of the year you're looking at a guy who's leading this team in offensive rating. Next one is another one from Christian. He says, I thought it would be interesting to compare Drew Timme's performance to other big game performances throughout the history of the program. During the national broadcast, they brought up Adam Morrison and Ronny Turiaf. It might be fun to celebrate this moment and look back at other great moments in the team's history. Yeah, this was kind of a topic that kind of floated around Gonzaga Twitter a little bit after the game, during the game, really. Tons of great individual performances to choose from. I think trying to weigh them in some kind of actual list is perhaps an off-season task that I will take on, but it's hard to weigh. Like, this is a huge game because it was the biggest, highest ranked program to come to Spokane ever. Like, there's no doubt that this is a big game, but it's not a tournament game. It's not even a WCC tournament game. Like, it doesn't have the same ramifications that those games do. So any game that had more meaning is going to have more of an impact in my mind. You look at like Adam Morrison dropping 43 against Oklahoma. Like, that was a fantastic, incredible game. Again, not a super meaningful game. He also did that in 2 overtimes, but still a really impressive game. Kyle Wiltshire dropping 45 against Pacific. Awesome. Super incredible game from him. It was against Pacific. They were going to win without it, but still super cool. Like, how does this compare to those? It compares more to those than it compares to, like, some of the really impactful tournament games. Adam Morrison dropped 35 against Xavier before his final game against UCLA. Like, that to me is more impactful. Domantas Sabonis absolutely working Jakob Poeltl against Utah when they were an 11 seed and they upset a 3 seed. Like, that to me is a more impactful performance. Nigel Williams-Goss had 23 points, 6 assists, 5 boards against South Carolina to send Gonzaga to the national championship. That is a more impactful performance to me. Drew Timme against USC last year didn't have the total points, but was an absolute machine against Evan Mobley, one of the best defensive big men that has played college basketball in the last few years. That to me is a bigger game. So it's hard to compare. Again, maybe I'll make a full list sometime. If I do, I'll probably separate tournament and non-tournament games. If we're doing non-tournament games, this is, if not the top of the list, very, very high. 37 points, 19 shots. Shot over 70% from the field against a top 5 team, the only player to ever do that. Absolutely. We're going to play Xavier for a couple of years. I'm gonna be happy about that because I think those were cool matchups. Last question of the show. It's the final one from Christian as well. He says, as a fan who puts the basketball schedule up in a common hallway, I want to know, for the love of John Stockton, why there's not a better, easier, higher quality way to watch the Zags when they are playing Alcorn State or Bellarmine, those kinds of teams. The WCC Network is not doing it for me. Shouldn't there just be a network that I can add to my cable package? I want to watch all the Zag sports. We went to a volleyball game the last time we were in Spokane. Our youngest would watch all those games. There has to be a better way. Yeah, it's money. it's money. That's the thing. The WCC Network, yeah, is a challenge. They have not done a good enough job making these games accessible for fans out of market. Straight up. I mean, that's a very legitimate criticism of the WCC Network. It's a criticism of the Pac-12 Network. It's a criticism of a lot of these places. Short of being BYU TV, where you can afford to buy your own network and have basically all of your sporting events streamed. That's what you're asking for. Gonzaga, they don't have the money to do that. They don't have the resources to do that. It's a staggering amount of time and energy and money to make that happen. It would be great. I wish Gonzaga could find a better relationship with like a Root Sports or something like that. I wish Root Sports was less restrictive with their stuff. If you're a Blazers fan as well, you know that it has been a very huge pain to try to even watch Blazers games this year because of the partnership that they have with Root and because of Root's unwillingness to be available on most streaming services. Very, very challenging. The way to consume sports right now is pretty messy all across the board, to be honest. It's not good. Gonzaga's caught in the middle of it in a lot of ways. I'm glad they have a lot of games on ESPN. That's easy for people to get for the most part. You know, they're going to have some nationally televised games on other networks as well, which is good. But yeah, the out of market, it's finding as many streams as you can. Stephen Carr, Escargo on Twitter. If you don't follow him, obviously the former host of Locked On Zags, he's been really good the first couple games this season of tweeting out where games are going to be available if there are out of market streams as well. So I would check that out, try to find it as best you can. But yeah, this is a problem that doesn't have an easy solution, and I don't imagine it's going to be one that's solved anytime super soon, unfortunately. All right, that is it for today. All of the questions. Thank you so much. I love Mailbag Monday. You all know that. I appreciate all of your questions. Super fun week coming up here at Locked On Zags. We're going to review tonight's game against Alcorn State on Tuesday's episode. Wednesdays, of course, another look at the WCC. I'm going to wait to record late on Tuesday night because BYU and Oregon are playing in the Phil Knight Invitational, which should be a super fun game. So we'll have a nice kind of live reaction to that game as well. Of course, Andy Locks on Thursday. So get your hot takes submitted to me whenever you're thinking of them. I'll get them in the show. And then we're going to preview the Bellarmine game on Friday. All of that right here on the Locked On Zags podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, also available now on YouTube. Another reminder, podcast links will be available on Twitter at Locked On Zags and on my personal Twitter account, which can be found at ScoreZagsScore. Finally, thank you for making the show your first listen of the day. Now is a great time to make your second listen of the day, the Locked On Bets podcast. Locked On Bets is your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, it's hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. All right, thank you all for listening, and go Zags.